Alright, welcome back to Chapter 3 of Banner in the Sky by James Ramsey Ullman. Again, sorry for any mispronunciations ahead of time. Alright, Chapter 3, 200 Dirty Dishes. In the kitchen of the Bew Site Hotel, old Theo Zerbriggen went about his work. He had long since finished up the breakfast dishes that Rudy had left half-washed, but meanwhile lunch had come and gone, and 100 new ones stood waiting for the suds. And for these, Theo had no time because he was busy cooking dinner. Gretchen, the waitress, moved back and forth from the dining room. "The boy is a good-for-nothing," she snorted, running out and leaving his work. "He did not run out," said Theo. "I have told you, his mother, Frau Matt, is sick and needs him. And besides," he added, there are enough clean dishes for dinner." Gretchen went back to the dining room, and Theo looked at the window. The sun is low, he thought, and he should be back soon. Even if he went all the way to the glaciers, he should be back soon. Old Theo, they called him. He was not really so old, not more than perhaps 55, but his brown eyes and his brown skin was wrinkled, his hair almost white, his eyes pale and watery behind craggy brows. And also he was a cripple. 15 years before, in the prime of his life, he had been one of the foremost guides of Kurtal, and the only one willing to accompany Joseph Matt and his employer, Sir Edward Stevenson, on their famous attempt on the Citadel. Unlike the other two, he had been brought down alive, but so badly injured from a 30-foot fall that his career as a mountainman was over. Even now, he walked with a deep limp. His left arm was half paralyzed and his shoulder hunched up against his neck. He had tried farming until his wife died and he grew too lonely. Then he had worked at odd jobs around the town, and when the Bew site was built, he became its cook. He was a good cook, but not a happy one. If it had not made it too dark for his work, he would have put blinds on the kitchen window to shut out the sight of the soaring mountains. There were footsteps in the alley outside. "Ah, there's the runaway," thought old Theo. But it wasn't. It was Rudy's uncle, Franz Lerner. He was a big man, not tall, but broad and stoutly built, and his shoulders filled the doorway as he entered. His face, too, was broad, strong, and square-cut, with weathered skin, a short fringe of beard, and dark, slow-moving eyes. Indeed, everything about him was slow. His gait, his gestures, his speech, slow and deliberate, slow and powerful. He was dressed in rough guide's clothing and held a pipe between his teeth. "Grüß Gott," he said to Theo. "Grüß Gott," he said to the cook. Franz looked around. "Where's the boy?" "He is out. I sent him to the market. His mother wants him to do an errand before he comes home. She asked me to tell him. I will tell him when he comes back." At the moment, Gretchen, the waitress, reappeared. "Good evening," she said to Franz. "Is it too bad your sister, the widow Matt, is ill?" "Ill? Why, yes, is she not? Old Theo said the boy had gone too." She looked questioningly at the cook. Franz looked at the cook, then his eyes moved to the stacks of dirty dishes. "So," he said, "it is that again?" Theo said nothing. Franz took a step forward. "Is it not?" he demanded. "He has sneaked off again to the mountains." Theo cleared his throat. "There were not many dishes," he murmured, "and besides, the day was so fine. It is not a question of how many dishes or of the weather. It is that here is where he works, where he belongs, not wandering around in the mountains." "I am not sure you are right," said Theo. "What do you mean by that?" Theo shrugged his twisted shoulders. "You cannot put out a fire by wishing it out. You cannot bottle the wind." The two men stood facing each other. Gretchen went back into the dining room. If you cannot control him, said Franz, I shall have to speak to Herr Hempel, the proprietor. Proprietor? Perhaps he should work in another part of the hotel. And perhaps he should not work in the hotel at all, said Theo. He must work in the hotel. It is his mother's wish. He is to be trained for the business. He is not a child anymore. He cannot be made to do what he does not want to. And what does he want to? Is to be a guide. Of course, not, if not a full guide, yet at least a porter, an apprentice. Franz shook his head. He is not strong enough to be a guide. He is too small, and also too irresponsible. He pointed at the dirty dishes. Look how he leaves things, how he shirks his work. What would he do in the mountains, where there are real problems and responsibilities? At least he should have the chance to learn. Old Theo came closer, and his voice grew louder. You are a guide, Franz, he said. When I was young, I too was a guide, and we know how such things are. He cannot stand to see the other boys going out as porters and helpers, learning to be guides, while he works in a kitchen like a girl or an old man. He is Joseph Matt's son, and the mountains are in his blood. And what do you think is in my sister's blood? Franz demanded. A widow at 23 with her husband killed on the citadel, a widow left with a single child. Do you expect her to let him do as his father did, to die as his father died? He brought a big hand down heavily on the table. No, there have been enough guides in the family, and enough sorrow for one woman. This boy will learn a trade, a profession. Soon, now he will go for training to a big hotel in Zurich. When he comes back, he will be a clerk, then a manager. One day, he may even be a proprietor, something the family can be proud of. Theo studied him with his pale old eyes. It is for your sister that you speak now, Franz, he said quietly, not for yourself. What I speak is sense, and what I speak is what will be. Franz turned abruptly to the door. I will go now and tell her about this thing. He went out. Theo stood for a while at the window, watching the mountains and the setting sun. Then he went back to his oven. Whatever they do, it will be no use, he thought. They will see. They will find out. You cannot bottle the wind. Frau Matt's house was small and neat, and so was Frau Matt. As a young girl, when she married Joseph Matt, she had been one of the beauties of Kurtal, and though the years of her widowhood had faded her, she was still in her late 30s, and attractive, almost a pretty woman. She had not grown fat, as did so many of the village women as they neared middle age. She had the same fine features and light complexion as her son. She was known for the sweetness of her smile, but there was no smile on her face this summer evening as she sat listening to her brother Franz. No, she said sadly, old Theo does not seem able to control Rudy at all. He does not even want to control him, said Franz. When this summer is over, it will be all right. I think now at 16, he is wild and willful, but in the fall he will go to Zurich for his training. He will be away from the mountains, and when he comes back, he will have interest and pride in his work. Her brother nodded without speaking. You know what I want for him, she said. How I have hoped and planned for him. You do not think I am wrong, Franz? I think you must do as your heart tells you. At least, my heart, yes. But it is not just that. It is not of myself that I want to think, but of Rudy, so that he may have a good life, so that he may grow up and marry and have children, and not destroy it all by... She broke off. When she spoke it again, it was with a great effort to be calm and reasonable. If he were a different sort of boy, bigger and stronger, perhaps I would feel differently. But he is so small, so delicate. Yes, Franz agreed. He is not built for the mountains. And he is so quick and bright. His manners are good. In the hotel business, he can make a great success. If only he will stop wanting to be what he is not. It is when he thinks of his father that he wants to be a guide. Yes, of course, when he thinks of his father. And when I think of him, of my own Joseph, of how young he was, how gay and proud, how he used to laugh when I was worried about him. Frau Matt closed his eyes and there was a silence in the room. Then the door opened and Rudy came in. "Good evening, Mother," he said. "Good evening, Uncle." The two looked at him without answering. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Only that we were wondering," said Franz grimly, "if you were coming home at all tonight. It was very busy at the hotel today. There were many dirty dishes." "Yes, I know. I saw them." You, Rudy saw, you mean you were there?" "It must have been a while. I was out on an errand, no doubt, and it must have been a very hard errand, considering what it did to your feet." Rudy looked down at his shoes, scuffed by rocks and coated with the dust of the trail. Did old Tio say?" "Your crony Tio told one lie after another, first to the waitress, then to me, and now you are taking up where he left off." Rudy was silent. His uncle stood up. "I am getting sick of all these lies, boy," he said. "Good and sick of all this nonsense." Still, Rudy said nothing. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" "I am sorry, Uncle." "Sorry? Is that all? Sorry until the next time when you do the same thing again?" "You promise me, Rudy," said Frau Matt. Gently, the boy couldn't look at her. "Yes, Mother," he murmured. "Why didn't you keep your promise?" "I don't know." "You don't know." It is hard to explain. I did not mean to go. Truly, I did not think of going at all. But when I stand there at the kitchen window, when I see the sun and the mountains, I do not want to scold," his mother told him. "In all other things you are a good boy. Only in this do you disobey me and lie to me." She paused, studying her son's face. "I want you to be happy," she went on. "I want only to do what is right and good for you. In the hotel and with Herr Hempel, so interested in you, you will have such a fine future. The best of any boy in Kurtal. Can't you see how much better it is than the other? Than only climbing around on rocks and ice?" "I have been a guide for 20 years, his uncle put in, "and look what it has got me. I do not have enough education even to speak to the fine visitors who now come here to Kurtal. I have not yet saved enough money to buy a dozen cows. Look what it has done for Tio Zerbigen. He is crippled, he is poor. Soon you will have a fine career. You will be a businessman, a gentleman. But he must work for all his life in a kitchen." There was a silence, and Rudy stared at the floor. "I will go now to the hotel," he murmured, "and finish the dishes." But as he turned to leave, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," said his uncle, and Captain Winter appeared. "Ah, Franz," he said. "They told me at your house that I could find you here." "It is an honor, my captain. Sit down, please." "This is my sister, Frau Matt." Winter bowed respectfully. "The honor is mine, madame," he said, "to meet the widow of the great Joseph Matt. And this is her son, Rudy," Franz said, as an afterthought. The Englishman turned and looked at the boy, but he remembered his promise, and no sign of recognition showed on his face. "Hello, son," he said pleasantly. Then he turned back to Franz. "I just want to ask," he said, "if you're available for a climb tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Yes, my captain." Franz hesitated. "That is, if you do not mean Wintersmouth." "No, I don't mean the Citadel. I was thinking of the Wonderhorn. I know you've been on it often, and they say it's a good climb." "Yes, it is good," Franz agreed. "And that it gives a clear view of the Citadel." "Yes, that is good too." "Excellent. Suppose we leave tomorrow about noon? We can spend the night at the Blousy hut and go on up the next morning. We'll need food and blankets, of course. It will probably be best to have a porter." He turned, if struck by a sudden thought. "How about the youngster here?" he suggested, indicating Rudy. "He should do fine as a helper." "No," said Franz. "No, my captain. The boy is not available. He works elsewhere. But I will find a good man who—" Rudy's voice cut suddenly across his uncle. "Please!" The word was as if wrenched from his flesh. "Please, just this once, let me come, and I will show you what I can do." Franz shook his head. "It is not possible. Only now we have just talked of these things, and your mother does not—" "But this is different, Uncle. With Captain Winter." Rudy's voice, his eyes, his whole body was pleading. "Captain Winter knows I can do it. He will tell you. Up on the glacier today, he saw what I can do." "On the glacier?" The guy's eyes moved to Winter. "You mean that he was with you, my captain?" "Oh, then they know?" Winter glanced at Rudy. "All we know," said Franz, "is that he went up to the mountains today, leaving his work and defying his mother. But he told you nothing of what happened? Happened? Frau Matt repeated. No, said Franz. He told us nothing. In that case, said Captain Winter, it will be my pleasure to tell you. Today, on the Blue Glacier, this boy saved my life. Saved your life? Breathed Frau Matt. Franz stared at him. What are you saying, my captain? Winter told the story, and they listened in silence. Rudy listened too, feeling the blood slowly seeping into his cheeks and forehead, until it seemed to him that his whole face was on fire. Now and then he raised his eyes, but dropped them almost instantly. And at last the captain came to the end of the story. Then he said, what your son did, Frau Matt, was a very skillful and very brave thing. There's no question but that I would be dead right now if he had not done it. I think his father, if he were alive today, would be proud of him. Now the pounding in Rudy's head was so strong that he thought at any moment it might split right open. Through it dimly, he was aware that his mother and uncle were no longer looking at Captain Winter, but at him. Indeed, Franz was staring almost as if he had never seen him before. When did you learn those things? The guide asked. I didn't. The boy's voice was no more than a whisper. I just did what seemed best. And you held the captain while he climbed up, all alone, with your own strength? Yes, uncle. Winter crossed the room and put a hand on Rudy's shoulder. Rudy told me, he said, that he should not have been up in the mountains, but as you see, it was very lucky for me that he was, and I beg you not to be angry with him. A boy who has done what he did deserves a reward, and I shall see that he gets it. But there's a reward you can give him that would be better than anything else. He paused and smiled at Frau Matt. Let him come with us tomorrow, on the Wunderhorn. Franz started to speak, stopped, and looked at his sister. And now Captain Winter went over to her. I think I know how you feel, Frau Matt, he said gently. But I promise you there would be no danger. Your brother and I will be right there with him, and the Wunderhorn is not a difficult mountain. Frau Matt looked at her hands, then at last she looked up. Please, Rudy murmured. What you have just told us, his mother said to Winter. What my boy has done, I am proud of him. Of course, but, she hesitated, but there are things, my captain, that perhaps you do not understand. Rudy is not a mountain boy, you see. He is not to be a guide, but a hotel man. For years we have planned his career, and now he is serving his apprenticeship in the kitchen at the Bew site, casting about 4 straws. She found one and clutched it. Every day he works there. The cook needs him. He cannot be spared. Rudy leapt forward and knelt by his mother's chair. Yes, I can. Truly, mother. The words tumbled over one another. Old Tio will let me go. I know he will. He has said so, and besides, there is Tony Hassler. He spoke to me last week. He would work as my substitute. He had seized her hands and was looking pleadingly into her face. Frau Matt looked back at him for a moment, and then past him, and the 2 men who stood watching. I know that Captain Winter is a great climber, she said at last. If he asked this for you, if he feels it is all right. Winter nodded reassuringly. And if your uncle, it is up to you. It is up to you. Sis and Frau Matt was beaten. She said, this once. But when she tried to go on, she couldn't, because Rudy was covering her face with kisses. When he reached the hotel kitchen, there were 200 dirty dishes waiting for him besides the tub. But for all he cared, there could have been 2,000. During the whole evening, he broke only 3. All right, that is the end of Chapter 3 of Banner in the Sky by James Ramsey Ullman. Have a good day.